She laughed as the tall, grease-stained mechanic wiped his hands on an old rag. Cameras clicked around her luxury car, gleaming under the afternoon sun. "If you can fix this engine," she said, with a smirk loud enough for her employees to hear, "I'll marry you." The crowd burst into laughter. She was a CEO, polished, powerful, untouchable, and he was just a black mechanic working in a dusty garage on the edge of town. But what none of them knew was that this moment, meant as a cruel joke, would flip both of their worlds upside down. And the laughter would soon turn into stunned silence. Monica Langford was the kind of woman whose presence filled a room before she ever spoke. CEO of a billion-dollar automotive firm, she built her empire on charm, confidence, and calculated arrogance. To the public, she was the face of modern success. But to those beneath her, she was a reminder of how power could blind compassion. That morning, her luxury car, a prototype her company had just unveiled, broke down on a remote highway outside Atlanta. Furious, she demanded roadside assistance. Instead of a sleek company crew, a local mechanic named Darius Cole arrived, a tall, quiet black man in worn coveralls, his hands rough from years of labor. Monica's assistants exchanged uneasy glances as she eyed him skeptically. The car represented cutting-edge engineering, and in her mind, someone from a small-town garage couldn't possibly understand its technology. She scoffed, tossing her sunglasses aside, and muttered, "Let's see what the genius can do." As Darius knelt to inspect the engine, the photographers Monica had brought for her PR shoot kept filming. The scene, her luxury car, her confident pose, and the humble mechanic, seemed like the perfect social media moment. Then she said it, half joking but cruel enough to sting, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." The crew laughed. Darius didn't. He just looked up, meeting her eyes with quiet dignity before returning to work. His silence made her strangely uncomfortable, as if he wasn't the one being mocked. Within minutes, he began diagnosing problems she hadn't even noticed. His focus, his precision, it unsettled her. And for the first time in a long while, Monica Langford felt the faintest hint of doubt, not in him, but in herself. The crowd that had gathered expected a show, a spectacle of failure. Monica's entourage stood beside their luxury SUVs, whispering jokes and smirking. Even her PR manager subtly recorded on her phone, ready to post another boss lady moment online. But Darius wasn't there for the spectacle. He was there for the machine. And he treated it with the same respect he gave every engine he touched. His hands moved with purpose, his voice calm as he asked for tools. No one helped him. They simply watched, waiting for him to give up. Monica crossed her arms. "You'll never figure it out," she muttered under her breath, but part of her wasn't sure anymore. He didn't respond. Instead, he reached deep beneath the polished hood, pulling out a cracked sensor line and a poorly installed valve. "Whoever built this didn't respect the design," he said quietly. "You can't rush perfection." His words struck her. She had said almost the same thing years ago during an interview, a line that became her company's slogan. Now hearing it from him, the irony felt like a mirror being held up to her own pride. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. Sweat gathered on Darius's forehead as he replaced a few temporary parts from his own truck, improvising fixes that shouldn't have been possible without official replacements. His knowledge ran deep, his movements steady, almost poetic. When he finally turned the key, the car's engine roared back to life. Smoother, quieter, more efficient than it had sounded even before the breakdown. The laughter stopped. Cameras lowered. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of power flowing through the machine. Monica's PR manager gasped. "Wait, it actually works?" Darius straightened, wiping his hands again. "Told you," he said simply. "Every engine deserves respect, no matter who built it." Monica's smirk had vanished. In its place was a look of stunned disbelief, and something else she didn't want to admit. Admiration. The man she mocked had just done what her entire engineering team couldn't. Her assistants whispered, "Ma'am, Should we delete the footage? But she didn't answer. Her thoughts were spinning. For the first time, Monica saw the cracks in her polished empire, not in metal, but in morality. She'd built a company claiming to empower others, yet in truth she'd only empowered herself. The scene unfolding before her felt like poetic justice, the universe forcing her to face the arrogance she'd worn like armor. Darius turned to leave, quietly packing up his tools. "Wait," Monica said instinctively. "How did you know what to do?" He smiled faintly. "I used to work for Langford Motors, until you shut down the plant." Her heart skipped. That factory, the one she closed to cut costs, had laid off hundreds, many from underprivileged communities. He'd been one of them. And now, fate had brought them face to face again. As Darius climbed into his old pickup, Monica felt the weight of her own words echoing in her mind. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you." It had been a joke then, but now it sounded like a promise she wasn't worthy to make. The air around them grew heavy, filled with a silence that was louder than any laughter. Monica stood frozen as Darius started his truck, preparing to drive away. She could have let him go, let the moment fade into another headline about a rich CEO's awkward encounter. But something inside her refused to stay quiet. "Wait," she called again, her voice softer this time. "You worked at Langford Motors in Atlanta, right?" He paused, glanced at her through the window and nodded once. She remembered the closure, the day she stood on a stage announcing strategic downsizing, smiling for cameras while hundreds lost their jobs. She had promised they'd find better opportunities. But looking at him now, standing in oil-stained boots while she wore a designer suit, that promise felt like a lie carved into steel. Monica stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell me back then? You could have appealed, transferred." Darius interrupted gently. "Because people like me don't get second chances in your world, Ms. Langford. We just keep building engines you take credit for." The words hit like a hammer. Around them, her staff shifted uncomfortably. The PR manager lowered the camera, unsure whether to film or disappear. Monica opened her mouth to defend herself, to say she didn't mean to mock him, that it was all just a joke. But even she didn't believe that anymore. The truth was simpler. She had looked down on him. Not because of his work, but because of who he was. Her chest tightened as realization sank in. All her talk about innovation, equality, and progress was hollow if it excluded the very people who built her success. Darius looked at her one last time. "You said you'd marry me if I fixed it," he said calmly, eyes unwavering. "I don't need a wife, just a little respect." Then he drove off, leaving behind the CEO, the crowd, and a car that ran perfectly, but a conscience that no longer did. That night, Monica couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered outside her penthouse window, but her mind kept returning to the quiet dignity in Darius's eyes, the way he spoke without raising his voice, the way truth didn't need anger to hurt. For the first time in years, she saw her reflection not in mirrors or magazine covers, but in the smear of oil still clinging to her wrist. A reminder of a man she had mocked, and a lesson she hadn't known she needed. The next morning, she canceled all her public appearances. Her board members were shocked when she called an emergency meeting, not to discuss profits or new launches, but accountability. She admitted on camera that Langford Motors had failed the very people it claimed to champion, workers like Darius, whose skills had built the foundation of its success. The video spread across social media, but this time, the headlines weren't about arrogance. They were about change. Days later, Monica drove herself, no photographers, no assistants, to the same small-town garage. Darius was there, fixing a customer's truck, same calm expression on his face. He looked up when she arrived, but didn't stop working. "Back again?" he said quietly. She nodded. "Not for repairs, for help?" She told him she wanted to reopen the plant he'd once worked in, under his leadership. A new initiative to train young mechanics from underrepresented communities. It wouldn't undo the past, but it would start rewriting the future. Darius studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, not with excitement but with quiet acceptance. Then let's build something that lasts this time. Monica smiled, genuinely, not for the cameras. Together, she said. As she drove away, the same car purred beneath her hands, perfectly tuned, a symbol of humility and rebirth. The world had mocked a mechanic once, but now it would remember his name. And for everyone watching, the story carried a message louder than any engine's roar. Respect isn't earned by wealth but by integrity.